I never expected to fall for the guy who almost ran me over in a Trader Joe's parking lot. But then again, I never expected a lot of things that happened that fall. It started on a random Thursday afternoon, the kind of gray, moody day where the sky threatens rain but never quite follows through. I'd just gotten off work, brain fried from back-to-back meetings and a printer jam that had somehow become my problem. All I wanted was to grab a frozen pizza and maybe some cookie butter to eat my feelings in peace. I was halfway across the lot, earbuds in, hoodie up, when this silver Subaru came flying around the corner. I jumped back instinctively, arms flailing, and slapped the hood before I even processed what I was doing. The car skidded to a stop and the driver's door flew open. "Shit! Are you okay?" a voice called out, half panic, half frustration. I yanked out my earbuds. "Yeah, thanks for asking. I'm only slightly traumatized." The guy stepped out and held up both hands, like I was a wild animal he didn't want to startle. He looked about my age, maybe a couple years older. Tall, athletic. One of those annoying types who somehow looked hot in a beanie and flannel. His dark hair curled slightly under the edge of his hat, and his expression was somewhere between apologetic and completely thrown off. "I swear I didn't see you," he said. "I wasn't even going fast." "You were going Trader Joe's fast," I replied, which is to say, fast enough to kill a guy if he's distracted by the seasonal pumpkin displays. He laughed, then winced like he wasn't sure if he was allowed to. "Look, let me make it up to you. Coffee or something? You like lattes?" That's when I should have walked away. That's when I should have told him to slow down next time and kept moving. But there was something about the way he looked at me, like he actually cared whether I said yes or no, that made me hesitate. "I don't do pity coffee," I said. "It's not pity," he replied, sticking his hands into the pockets of his jeans. "It's guilt. Much sexier." That made me snort, and before I could think better of it, I said, "Fine, one coffee, but only if you promise not to run me over next time." Deal. We ended up walking to the tiny cafe next door, one of those indie places with mismatched mugs and obscure indie music playing just a little too loud. I learned his name was Daniel. He was 27, worked in web development, lived a few blocks away, and had just come from picking up groceries for his sister, who'd just had a baby. I don't remember everything we talked about, just that the conversation was easy in a way it hadn't been for me in a long time. By the time we finished our drinks, the weirdness of our parking lot encounter felt like a distant memory. When we said goodbye, he touched my elbow and said, "Seriously, sorry again. I'm really glad you're okay." Something in the way he said it made my chest tighten. I thought that would be the end of it. A random run-in, a free coffee, a funny story to tell my friends. But then, 2 days later, I saw him again. And this time, it wasn't by accident. I was at the laundromat, my usual Sunday ritual. Hoodie up, headphones in, trying to ignore the whirring dryers and the screaming toddler in the corner. I was halfway through folding a sad pile of socks when I felt a tap on my shoulder. I turned, already half annoyed, and there he was, Daniel, holding a mesh laundry bag in one hand, a smile tugging at the corner of his mouth. "Trader Joe's survivor," he said. "Small world," I blinked. "You do your laundry here?" "Just moved a few blocks away," he said, tossing his bag onto the machine next to mine. "My place doesn't have in-unit." Yet another thing I didn't know I'd miss until it was gone. I didn't know what to say. My brain was still playing catch-up, trying to figure out if this was a coincidence, or if maybe, just maybe, he remembered I mentioned this spot during our coffee. "You mind?" he asked, motioning to the folding table beside me. I shook my head, stepping aside. We folded in silence for a moment, side by side, the air thick with something that felt suspiciously like mutual curiosity. Eventually, he broke it. "So do you come here for the ambiance, or are you just a masochist like me?" I laughed. Definitely a masochist. But hey, the spin cycle gives me time to reflect on all my poor life choices. Daniel chuckled. "Well, I'm glad one of them led to me not killing you in a parking lot. That's setting the bar pretty low for successful relationships." "Good thing I'm tall," he said, grinning. "I like low bars," I snorted. I didn't mean to, but it slipped out, and he smiled like that was the exact reaction he'd been hoping for. "God damn it." "So," he said, leaning casually on the edge of the table, Hypothetically, if I invited you to come check out my new place sometime, maybe for dinner, would that be a weird second near-death date? Or I felt my ears heat up. You cook? I do. I mean, not well, but I'm confident enough to burn things creatively. I smiled. That sounds like a risk. I like risks. Something about the way he said it made my stomach flutter. We exchanged numbers before we left. He texted me that evening with a photo of a half-prepped lasagna and the caption, "Pray for this pasta." I did. And 3 nights later, I found myself standing outside his apartment building, clutching a bottle of wine, and wondering if I was about to make the best or worst decision of my post-college life. When the door swung open, he was barefoot, wearing a worn t-shirt and sweatpants, his hair damp like he just showered. "Hey," he said, and something about the way he looked at me in that moment made my heart stop. "Hey," I replied. Dinner was surprisingly good. He'd made garlic bread, a not terrible salad, and the lasagna didn't try to kill me. We ate on the couch, legs stretched out in front of us, music playing low in the background. At some point, we started talking about stuff that wasn't small talk. Family, college, work. I found out he used to play rugby, that his mom was a nurse, that he once shaved his head on a dare, and deeply regretted it. And then there was this quiet moment, just a pause in the conversation, where we both looked at each other and neither of us looked away. The air changed. "You're staring," I said, trying to sound playful. "So are you." He shifted slightly, closer. "Can I ask you something?" I nodded, my pulse loud in my ears. "Do you always make jokes when you're nervous?" I smiled, then shrugged. "Only when I want to kiss someone, and I'm not sure if I should." He didn't say anything. He just leaned in and kissed me. The kiss wasn't urgent, it wasn't dramatic or hungry or movie-worthy. It was soft. It was the kind of kiss that felt like a question. His lips moved against mine like he was waiting for me to push him away, like he was giving me every chance to say no. But I didn't. I couldn't. My whole body leaned into him without thinking. When we pulled back, I didn't say anything. Neither did he. He just rested his forehead lightly against mine and let out a breath, like he'd been holding it in since the day we met. "You okay?" he asked quietly. I nodded. "Yeah. You?" He gave a small, self-conscious smile. "Kinda surprised I did that." "Yeah? Yeah. Not because I didn't want to. Just, I don't usually do things unless I'm absolutely sure how they're gonna go." I tilted my head. "And this? You weren't sure?" He shook his head. "Not at all." We sat like that for a moment, our shoulders touching, his knee against mine, the empty plate between us long forgotten. I felt weightless and grounded all at once. After a bit, he got up to grab us both a drink. I stared at the muted TV, wondering what the hell was happening to me. Because something had shifted in that moment. I wasn't just intrigued by him anymore. I was drawn to him. Like gravity. Daniel came back with 2 beers, handed me one, and sat down closer this time. Not obnoxiously close, just enough that his arm grazed mine when he raised his bottle. "To almost running you over," he said. "To bad reflexes and good timing," I replied, clinking my bottle with his. We drank. We watched whatever was playing. I could feel the tension again, but it was different now. Like a thread pulled taut between us, not demanding, but waiting. He glanced over at me. "You stay in long?" "Wasn't planning on it," I said, but I could be convinced. His eyes flicked down to my mouth, then back up. "I could try." I didn't move, didn't speak. I just stared back, letting the moment thicken. Eventually, he said, "You know, I thought you hated me when we first met. I thought you were a hot mess with a death wish." "Fair," he said, nodding. "Still might be." We kissed again. Longer this time. Deeper. His hand slid along the side of my neck, fingertips barely pressing in. Mine curled around the edge of his shirt, pulling him just slightly closer. Everything else faded. The TV, the beer, the city sounds outside. All I could focus on was the way his breath hitched when I ran my fingers along the back of his hairline. After a while, we broke apart and he just looked at me like he was trying to memorize my face. "You want to stay the night?" he asked, not pushing, just offering. I hesitated, not because I didn't want to, but because I did. "Yeah," I said quietly. "I do." I followed him to his bedroom, nerves buzzing just beneath my skin. It wasn't like this was my first time sleeping over at someone's place, but with Daniel, it didn't feel like a hookup. It felt like something in motion, something delicate and unknown. The room was simple, just a bed, a lamp, a few plants on the windowsill. Lived in, but not messy. He pulled off his shirt casually, like it was nothing, and tossed it into a corner. I tried not to stare at the smooth slope of his back as he leaned over to plug in his phone. "You good with sleeping in your clothes?" he asked, turning to face me. I hesitated, then pulled off my hoodie and kicked off my shoes. "Yeah, I'm fine." We climbed into the bed, awkward at first, like we weren't sure if we were supposed to cuddle or keep to our sides. He turned off the light, and the room went quiet. The mattress shifted as he moved closer. His arm brushed mine. And then, slowly, he laced his fingers through mine under the blanket. Just like that. No words. I didn't fall asleep right away. My mind was racing, cycling through all the ways this could go wrong. How fast this was moving. How little I really knew about him. But every time he shifted closer in his sleep, every time I felt the weight of his leg against mine, it quieted something in me I didn't even realize needed calming. We woke up wrapped around each other, like it was the most natural thing in the world. Morning light filtered through the blinds, soft and golden. His hair was a mess. His breath smelled like coffee and sleep. And when his eyes blinked open and met mine, he smiled like he'd been waking up next to me for years. "Hey," he whispered. "Hey." He leaned in and kissed me, slow and lazy, like we had nowhere to be, like we hadn't just kissed for the first time the night before. I could feel my whole body relax into it. After a while, we got up and made breakfast. Toast. Eggs. Nothing fancy. But we moved around each other in the kitchen like we'd done it 100 times. He handed me a plate without asking what I wanted. I passed him the butter before he reached for it. It was weird. And terrifying. And kind of amazing. Over coffee, I asked him, "So, what was that?" He looked up from his mug. "You mean last night?" "Yeah." He nodded slowly, like he'd been thinking about it too. "I don't know. But it felt right." I watched him for a second. "You've done this before?" He shook his head. "Not like this." I wanted to ask more, dig deeper, but I didn't want to ruin the moment with overthinking, so I let it go, for now. After breakfast, we lingered on the couch again, legs tangled, a blanket tossed over us. He played a show I half-watched. My mind kept drifting. To his hand on my knee. To the way his thumb kept tracing circles on my skin. To how easy it felt. Eventually, I had to leave. Deadlines, life, all that real-world stuff creeping back in. As I pulled on my hoodie and grabbed my phone, he walked me to the door. "I'm glad you stayed," he said, voice low. "Me too." He leaned in, pressed a kiss to my cheek, one of those soft, lingering ones that made your face burn after. "Text me when you get home?" "Yeah," I said, stepping out into the cool air. "I will." And I did, because something told me this wasn't the end. It was just the beginning. Things didn't go back to normal after that night. Not in a bad way. Just not in the way I expected. I kept waiting for things to get awkward, or for Daniel to ghost, or for one of us to backpedal, but that never happened. He texted me later that same afternoon. Nothing dramatic. Just a photo of his half-eaten lunch, and the caption, "Could have used your superior toast skills today." And from there, we slipped into this rhythm. Half dating, half still figuring it out. We'd meet up a couple times a week, grab dinner, watch shows, walk around the neighborhood at night with coffees in hand. talking about everything from tech crap I didn't understand to movies that made us cry when we were kids. There were times when he'd lean against me without a word, times he'd rest his head on my shoulder while scrolling through his phone. It wasn't all fireworks and dramatic confessions. It was quieter than that, more grounded, more real. The first time we went out in public together, just the two of us, I caught myself watching him like I didn't already know what his mouth tasted like. We were in a bookstore, of all places, and he handed me a novel with a teasing smirk. "You ever actually read anything without dragons in it?" he asked. I gave him a shove. "Says the guy who has 3 different copies of Dune," he grinned. "They're different translations." "You're such a nerd. Takes one to know one." Later that night, we sat in his living room, eating takeout straight from the containers. There was a lull in the conversation, the kind where comfort had replaced the need to fill silence. He looked over at me, fork paused halfway to his mouth. "Can I ask something?" "Yeah, of course. Are you telling people about us?" I hesitated. He noticed. "It's okay," he said quickly. "I'm not either. Not yet, just wondering." I set down my chopsticks. It's not that I'm hiding it, I just don't really know how to describe it yet. What we are. "Yeah," he said, nodding slowly. "Same." And it wasn't a tense moment. It didn't feel like pressure. It was just two people being honest about being unsure. But I kept thinking about it. About how I'd catch myself smiling when I saw his name on my phone. About how I'd started bringing a toothbrush to his place without even realizing it. A couple weeks later, we were lying on his couch again, legs tangled, watching some dumb movie neither of us was paying attention to. He kept reaching under the blanket, brushing his fingers along my arm. I glanced at him, and he looked back like he'd been waiting for me to. "You ever think about where this is going?" I asked. He was quiet for a second, then nodded. "Yeah. All the time." "And?" Daniel shifted, turning slightly so we were facing each other more. "And I like where it's going, even if I don't totally understand it yet." I nodded, heart beating faster than I wanted to admit. "Me too." He leaned in and kissed me, soft and slow. Then he whispered, "You're kind of my favorite person right now." And just like that, something clicked into place. Something I hadn't even realized I was waiting for. The shift didn't come with fireworks. It came in small things, like how he started leaving a clean towel for me in the bathroom, or how his fridge gradually started carrying the snacks I liked. He never mentioned it, I never pointed it out, but the next time I stayed over and saw my favorite sparkling water lined up next to his kombucha, I couldn't stop smiling. I started calling his place home by accident. Just little slips. I left my charger at home when I meant his apartment. "I'll be home by 9 when I meant back to him." He noticed. I know he did. But he never corrected me. Then came the night I met his friends. I didn't expect much. Maybe a casual game night, a couple of beers, and some introductions that would slide under the radar. Instead, it was a full-blown housewarming party at his friend Taylor's loft, complete with music, drinks, and way more people than I felt prepared for. "You sure this is a good idea?" I asked as we stood outside the building, the buzz of conversation and music drifting down the hallway. Daniel shrugged, adjusting the sleeves of his Henley. "You don't have to make a speech or anything. Just come inside, drink something, be next to me." It sounded simple, but when he placed his hand lightly on the small of my back and led me through the door, I realized what he meant. He wasn't hiding me. He wasn't explaining me away as a roommate or an old friend. He introduced me by name, just my name. But then he'd do things like grab my hand while laughing at a joke, or lean in to whisper something only I could hear. It wasn't performative. It wasn't for show. It was like he wanted me there, like he needed me to know I belonged. Around midnight, I stepped out onto the balcony to breathe. Daniel followed a minute later, bringing a bottle of water and a quiet smile. "You okay?" "Yeah," I said. "It's just new." "I know," he said, moving beside me. "Same." He looked out at the street below, then back at me. "I used to think I'd never have this," he said, almost under his breath. Not because I didn't want it, but because I didn't think I could ever want someone enough to figure it out. I swallowed hard. But now, he turned, leaned back against the railing, and looked at me the way he had that first night, like I was a puzzle he was slowly solving. Now I think maybe I was just waiting for the right person to make me want to, and I didn't know what to say to that. I just reached over and laced my fingers through his. It felt like a quiet promise. Later that night, after we left the party and got back to his place, we didn't even bother turning on the lights. We collapsed into bed, fully clothed, shoes kicked off somewhere in the hallway. He curled into me like it was instinct, his head tucked against my chest, his arm draped across my stomach. "I've never felt like this before," he murmured. "Me neither," I whispered. And for once, I wasn't scared of that. I don't know when it stopped being casual. Maybe it never was. Maybe we were just pretending it could be, until it wasn't. It was a quiet Sunday morning, a couple months after that night on the balcony. I woke up in Daniel's bed, our bed now, and everything was still. Just the soft sound of the fan overhead and his breathing next to me. I turned and watched him sleep. His hair a mess, lips slightly parted, one arm tucked under his pillow, the other flung across my waist. I should have been used to it by now, the sight of him like this, unguarded and close, but it still made my chest tighten every time. He stirred after a few minutes, eyes fluttering open, gaze landing on me like it always did. "Hey," he said, voice rough from sleep. "Hey." "Why are you staring at me?" "Because you're prettier when you're not talking." He grinned and shoved my shoulder lightly, but didn't move away. "You're such an ass." "You like it?" "Yeah," he admitted, smiling. "I do." We lay there a while, the morning creeping in through the blinds, warm and slow. Then he said something that caught me off guard. "I told my sister about us." I sat up a little, surprised. "Yeah?" "Yeah. She took it better than I expected. Asked when she could meet you officially, like you're a new puppy." I laughed, relief pouring through me. "And you're okay with that?" He nodded, stretching. "Yeah. I think I'm done being quiet about this. About you." It was a small moment, but it meant everything. There'd been no grand declarations, no dramatic speeches. Just him, choosing me, choosing this, without hesitation. We spent the rest of the day doing nothing. Groceries, laundry, arguing about which trash bags were better. It was the kind of day that would have been boring with anyone else. But with him, it felt like everything was right. That night, while we were brushing our teeth side by side, I caught his reflection watching me in the mirror. "What?" I asked through a mouthful of toothpaste. He wiped his mouth, then shrugged. "Nothing. Just thinking." "Dangerous." He smirked, then leaned over and kissed my cheek, toothpaste breath and all. "I think I'm falling in love with you," he said, voice quiet and steady. I froze, then turned to face him fully. "I think I already fell," I said. He blinked, just once, then smiled, slow and sure, like he'd known all along. We didn't need to say anything else. That night, lying next to him, I realized something I hadn't allowed myself to believe before. This wasn't just a phase, or a fling, or some weird twist of fate that started in a grocery store parking lot. This was real. And for the first time in a long time, I wasn't afraid of what came next.